give me a moment, Matt. I don't see anybody jumping in. Okay, looks like people are just coming in.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay. Good afternoon. It looks like people are just starting to come in, trickling in. So I will give it a few minutes and I'll give a few updates and take that dreaded time where people are logging in and maybe grabbing a quick lunch. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Greg Mint, Executive Director of NEDC. And you are in the session, since we didn't have a blasted banner right there when you come in, construction of a modified dry well to manage urban stormwater in a complex geological setting. And we'll get that session started here in just a few minutes, but wanted to give a few updates about NEDC and things that we have coming up. And I believe most of you, I looked at the attendee list, most of you know who we are and what we do, but we've been rolling out a lot of technical workshops and a lot of sessions that we can offer in a virtual setting, such as today. Two sessions we have coming up that you might want to be aware of, depending on what area of interest you have. Next week, we're doing what's called energy transitions in the Northwest. And this is a really more of an energy sector type of discussion. It's going to be in person at Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt. And so, yes, we are occasionally in person for workshops. So this is something that we're going to try to bring the community together in Seattle and do an in-person event there. And that's on November 15th. The next event we have after that is on November 17th, and it will be virtual. It's environmental justice, practical considerations for due diligence, permitting, enforcement, and community engagement. And that's a very popular topic right now, and really a pretty all-star lineup of speakers that are even coming in nationally. That's put on by Haley and Aldridge. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And all these are posted on our website, nedc.org. And we try to keep that as up to date as possible. But right now, as we kind of come into the year, we're looking at what we do next year. And so if you're with an environmental firm or a regulated business and you have a topic you'd love to kind of bring to the industry and share, let me know. And we would love to put that on the schedule now. What we do here often for members is we want to go deeper on topics. I think today is probably a perfect example of going a little bit deeper than something that's very broad and very generic. So this is a technical talk, and I think we want to hear more of those. So if you have any ideas or something you'd like to hear, bring that forward. And as we roll into the new year, we will have what is called our State of the State event. That's really a public policy type of event. It's a fun event. We don't have a date set. We're looking at late January. So as that comes together, you'll hear more about that. But it's always a fun gathering, and that will be in person, absolutely in person. And to wrap up the year, most everyone knows business and the environment. That's our 2-day, as some say, hey, that's your annual meeting. So in essence, it's an annual meeting, but a 2-day, 4-track, robust program. And we have everything from emerging contaminants. We have our fundamentals on the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, RCRA, those kinds of things. And we have a lot of hot topics. So we have ESG discussions, policy discussions, EPA, what's going on with the Superfund sites. Take a look at the agenda. That's on businessandtheenvironment.com. Very robust agenda. And I would really encourage you, if you haven't been to that conference, come to that one. That's a big one. That's a good one as well. So with that, I'm just going to kick it off here. And, today's speaker is Matt Polbecker. He's a senior hydrologist with GSI Water Solutions. He's been with GSI about 15 years, pretty long tenure with GSI. And Matt and I were talking about, this is a conversation. So if you have questions, please put those in the Q&A or chat. I will be working with Matt to monitor some of that input and feedback. He probably has 30+ minutes of a presentation, but if you have conversations and topics you want to cover, do it. Jump in and let's take advantage of the opportunity. But with that, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to black out my screen and I'll sit back and enjoy the presentation.
All right. Hey, Greg, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And just to reiterate what you said, I'd like this to be more of a discussion than a lecture. So if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and Greg's going to monitor that. And I'll try to pause at a few times as well to create some space for those questions. In any case, you know, a little bit about myself. As Greg mentioned, I'm a hydrogeologist with GSI Water Solutions, and I have a bit of an interesting background. Most of what I do is on the water supply side. So water well design, construction, aquifer storage and recovery, artificial recharge, all that good stuff. But I also took 3 years away from consulting, and I worked for the Department of Environmental Quality here in Oregon for the UIC program. And so I also have this kind of Drywell and UIC experience. That when I was working with drywells, I would always kind of look at them through this water well lens and kind of think about things like, well, what do we do in the water well world that we're not doing but could do over in the drywell world? And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today. Basically, what we're discussing today is a project that is stretched back over about 3 or 4 years, where the city of Gresham was having some drainage challenges, Gresham, Oregon, sorry, having some drainage challenges in a newly developing part of town. And we put our heads together and thought about some kind of outside the box solutions to those challenges, did some feasibility studies, and then we ended up going to construction, and the construction was success. So it's kind of a neat story to tell, and that's what I'm going to share with you today. So let's go ahead and dive right in. One bookkeeping note, because when I get to talking about this stuff, I use a couple words interchangeably. UICs and drywells, I'm going to use those interchangeably. A UIC is an underground injection control. That is any device that is designed to place fluids in the subsurface. A drywell is a type of UIC. So anyway, just keep that in mind. I don't want there to be confusion when I'm talking about UICs and drywells. So quick overview of what we'll be talking about. First, I want to just review some of the background. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I call conventional drywells, which are the drywells that we all think about and know and love when we are working on a drywell project. And then I want to talk about modified drywells, which are really some of the modifications that the city of Gresham made to these conventional drywells to solve their stormwater management challenges. And I don't, when I say that, it sounds like the city of Gresham invented these drywells that they installed. These are really some designs that have been implemented in other parts of the country, and we've kind of brought them up to Oregon. I want to talk a little bit about the regulatory framework next, right? So whenever we're talking about modifying a drywell, let's think about what the regulations might have to say about that modification. And then we'll kind of get into the meat of the discussion and talk about the desktop study that the city did to look at the feasibility of these modified drywells. And then we'll dive into the case study where they actually constructed one of these and had some success. Finally, we'll talk about conclusions and recommendations. So quickly, conventional drywells, this is what they look like. They are cylindrical structures. They tend to be anywhere between 20 and 40 feet deep, at least in Oregon. 20 feet in the Portland Gresham area. You get down into Milwaukee, you see them up to 40 feet deep. And these are concrete rings about 4 feet in diameter. And if you're looking down into one of them, this is what they look like. You know, typically there's a catch basin that will collect stormwater runoff from an impervious surface and convey that into the UIC itself where exfiltration occurs. There are a couple of kind of key characteristics when it comes to these conventional drywells. And number one is that they are a bit depth limited to, again, 40 feet is about as deep as I see them. And number two is these are, they're basically concrete rings shoved into a hole in the ground. You don't get, filter packs or seals or some of the more sophisticated, sort of construction techniques that we see around water wells. So conventional dry wells are very common in the Pacific Northwest, especially out west as well. What we're looking at here on the left-hand panel is all of the UICs in the city of Portland. These are, sorry, public UICs. And the city owns and operates about 9,600 public UICs. And they estimate that for every one public UIC, there are 2 private UICs. So some quick math, we're looking at about 30,000 dry wells in the city of Portland. But they're also used throughout the state. So the city of Kaiser, which is a little bit north of Salem, for those not familiar, they have about 85 of these conventional dry wells. So very common. The conventional dry well works very well. Given our geology out here, we tend to have some very permeable gravels near surface. And most of the time you can stick one of these dry wells in. They tend to be pretty cost effective and solve your stormwater management situation at your site. But conventional dry wells don't work in every case. There are some situations where these modified dry wells might make some more sense. And one of those is shown. We're looking at a cross section here. This is down in the Pleasant Valley area of Gresham. So this is south of the city where some new development was occurring. And basically the geology down there are some gravels and basalt that are capped by anywhere between 60 and 100 feet of low permeability silt. So stormwater management is a real challenge here. The LID doesn't work too well. The conventional dry wells can't get through the silt because we can't get them deep enough. So this is a situation where if we have that ability to go deeper and tap these gravels beneath the silt, then we could infiltrate some of our stormwater. And this was actually the situation where the city and I started kind of talking about what maybe a modified sort of design would solve some of our challenges in this area. Other times when conventional dry wells may not work, if the shallow soils are fill, there's some jurisdictions here where there are prohibitions against infiltrating through fill material. And finally, if there's perched groundwater present, that also can be a situation where shallow dry wells or conventional dry wells don't work. And we'll be talking a lot about that in the case study, so I'm not going to go into it too much here. So I'll just pause for a second in case anyone had any questions. All right, let's talk about modified dry wells. So what do I mean when I say that? I mean, there are a couple of things. So first of all, these are dry wells that are deeper than that 40-foot limit for the conventional dry wells. And there are kind of 3 things that depth gets you. Number one, you're able to tap into deeper permeable gravels not present in those upper 40 feet. The second thing that these can buy you are you can bypass shallow perched groundwater. So this is the situation in Gresham where we have some perched groundwater, and what we're able to do is seal that off and infiltrate into unsaturated soils below it. Okay, we'll go into more detail later. And the third thing that this gets you is you're able to generate more head or create more head in your dry well during infiltration. So infiltration is the formula for that is Darcy's law. So we have the Q, which is your volumetric infiltration rate, and it's a function of your permeability. That's a property of your soil. The area, right? So it's the area of your dry well, or the sidewalls and bottom of your dry well, and also this head gradient. So the more head that you can build up in your dry well, the greater the exfiltration rate from the dry well. And one quick caution I would mention is that this is a theoretical relationship. So there's not a one-to-one relationship between your head and your infiltration rate. There are efficiency issues that will tend to reduce your infiltration rate as your head is increased proportionally. But you can still get more infiltration with a higher head. Finally, or number two, when we talk about modified dry wells in addition to the depth, is this ability to put a seal in, which can seal off perched groundwater. So that's the background. I'll pause real quick here just in case anyone had any questions before we dive into regulatory framework.
Matt, there is a question. I don't know if you can see that. It says, what is the typical regulation, state or other jurisdiction, regarding pre-treatment before discharge into dry wells?
So that's a great question. Could I answer that in about 3 slides from now?
Sure.
I promise I'll answer that. And I can't see the question, so thanks for reading that. I appreciate that. Sure. Okay, so drywell regulation. The first thing, just to upfront caveat here, is that stormwater UICs that infiltrate stormwater are called Class 5 UICs under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. So everything I talk about today is going to be pertaining to Class 5 UICs. So again, these UICs are regulated under the Safe Drinking Water Act by EPA at the national level. However, in Oregon and Washington, EPA has delegated the UIC programs to the states. So Oregon and Washington have adopted their own UIC regulations. Oregon adopted theirs in 2001. Not sure about Washington, but you have to treat each state separately when it comes onto the regulatory side. So first I'll talk about Oregon. And there are a few regulations to keep in mind when you're thinking about these modified dry wells. First of all, there's a depth limitation, okay? The dry wells cannot be deeper than 100 feet. Little caveat to that is there are 2 ways to have a dry well authorized. One is rule authorization. That's 99% of UICs in Oregon are authorized by rule. All that means is that your dry well meets the language of the Oregon administrative rules. If you're rule authorized, you're limited to that 100-foot depth. If you have a permit, then you could theoretically be deeper than 100 feet. The permit, there are a handful of those, about 40 or so in the state. They're really tailored for jurisdictions and businesses that own several tens to several thousands of UICs. The fee for that, I believe the application fee is north of $15,000. So just figure you're going to probably be limited to 100 feet. Also, these modified dry wells need 5 feet of vertical separation distance between the bottom of the dry well and seasonal high groundwater. This is something that also applies to conventional dry wells. And as with conventional dry wells, you cannot have a dry well located within a well setback, which is 500 feet or the 2-year time of travel for a water well. Now I'll answer the pre-treatment questions. So in Oregon, and I think Kevin Weberling, who's the UIC hydrogeologist, I'd invite him to jump in here if he wants to put you on the spot, Kevin. But I would say in general in Oregon, the pre-treatment requirements are, we don't have a prescriptive framework like you do up in Washington. So pre-treatment requirements are listed on rule authorization forms. It could be as simple as a sumped catch basin, or it could be as complex as bioswales and filters, et cetera, upstream of your dry well. Kevin, did you, I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but is there anything you wanted to add?
Is this, which Kevin, I want to make sure I can allow him, give him talking
Yeah,
permissions.
Kevin Weberling.
All right, I think I did.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, no, that's good, Matt. I think there isn't anything in the language that's, hard set rules, but yeah, the catch basins, said manholes, bioswales, I mean, it varies. But that's typically what's considered the pre-treatment.
Thanks for jumping in. I appreciate it.
No,
It's
yeah.
been a few years since I was in Kevin's seat, so I mean, I want to recognize that.
Thanks.
And Matt, let me jump in here with another question
Yeah.
that might be appropriate now. It said this is from Derek Sando, is it Sandoz, I believe? Regarding pre-treatment, DEQ UIC just requires some form of pre-treatment. Agree with Matt's answer. What are the pre-treatment requirements for UICs? UICs are required to have pre-treatment. Acceptable pre-treatment types are provided in DEQ's Industrial Stormwater Best Management Practices Manual.
Thanks for adding that. That's absolutely right. Okay, moving on to Washington. So I'm going to kind of fake my way through Washington. Again, it's a different state with a different set of regulations. And if I were ever to do a project in Washington, I would be looking for someone to help me out, someone with some local experience. So I would characterize the regulations in Washington as more prescriptive. And these regulations are found in the Western Washington Stormwater Manual. There's a hydrogeologic study that's required just to confirm that groundwater won't be contaminated. The vertical separation distance requirement is larger, so it's more than just the 5 feet. I want you to have 15. There are also some sealing requirements with regards to impermeable layers, and there are also several other kind of minor requirements. I think these are the big ones. Okay, regarding pre-treatment in Washington, and I'm probably not the best person to answer that. I am aware that it's much more prescriptive than it is in Oregon, and there are certification programs you have to be paying attention to. But like I said, I would, if doing a project in Washington, I'd have someone else to help me out with this sort of stuff. So I don't know if that answers the questions or not, but. Okay, so their regulatory framework. Any other questions about that? All right, I'm not hearing anything. So let's move on and talk about the desktop evaluation. So the first step, really, before investing in this sort of dry well, is to do a desktop evaluation and assess, is this feasible, and what kind of infiltration rates do you think we could get? So I'm going to talk through that. There are really 4 components to the desktop evaluation that we did with the city. We looked at the geology of their study area, and so we'll talk about this a little bit later. But basically, the city had a study area where they had some challenges related to their MS4 capacity. All right, so that's kind of where we were looking, and we looked at 4 things. We looked at the geology of that area, the hydrogeology, and when I say hydrogeology, I mean the depth to groundwater in that area, also the permeability of the subsurface soils. We looked at regulatory aspects, and we also looked at cost aspects. And the outcomes of the desktop study are, like I said, number 1, is it feasible? and what kind of rate do you think you'd be able to, infiltration rate do you think you'd be able to get? And also a ranking of where should we put this dry well within our study area to get the most bang for our buck. Now these desktop evaluations, they can range from simple, if you have just a site that you're looking at, to more complicated. Like with the city of Gresham, they had a study area they were looking at. So there was a little more in-depth of a look. So we'll step through this desktop study. And this is the study area in Gresham. It's highlighted in yellow. Okay. And we have several, these dots and these lines are basically showing stormwater infrastructure. So the green lines are the MS4 infrastructure within the study area. You'll see we also have these diamonds. Those are UICs. Okay. There's also LID in this area, which is not being shown. There are also several borings in the area. So the city's been kind of poking around here for a while, trying to come up with some infiltration solutions. So we had some actual site-specific data that we could use. And so what's the issue? The issue is that this MS4 system is basically at capacity and it needs some expensive, kind of costly upgrades. So what the city was looking for is, are there other solutions that would be more cost effective that could allow us to handle or overcome these stormwater management challenges? As I mentioned, there are dry wells in the study area over in here in LID, but they're not particularly effective because there's perched groundwater in the study area. So we're going to look at a cross-sectional view through the study area from A to A prime. And what we have in this area is two geologic units. We have the Troutdale Formation, and those are gravels and silts, other materials that came off the Cascade Mountains and out the gorge and were deposited a few million years ago. And then we have these flood deposits on top of those. And the flood deposits are, say, 15 or so thousand years old. Those came out of the gorge due to the bursting of an ice dam on Glacial Lake, Missoula. The difference between these two units, I mean, why does this matter? Well, it matters because the Troutdale Formation is much older, it's highly weathered, it's low permeability, whereas these flood deposits are high permeability and they're younger. Okay, so what happens is water infiltrates into these flood deposits, and partly that's dry wells and also just infiltration from precipitation, and it accumulates on the top of the Troutdale Formation. And so any dry wells that are being installed in this study area are basically completed in the perched groundwater, and they don't function very well. One caution I just want to throw out, don't pay too much attention to the areas shown with perched groundwater, because these borings were done at different times of years. And, I would bet you dollars to donuts that you would find perched groundwater in these areas up here where you do borings at the right time of year.
Matt, we do have another question, and I'm going to ask Amy Patton. She sent me looks like a quick email or chat was disabled, but if Amy is allowed to talk, Amy, I just made you live. If you want to ask your question, we'll kind of do things a little differently today, but Amy, if you can hear me, go ahead and ask a question. I've asked you to unmute, and it's all you. Not hearing her, but let me go ahead and read it, Matt, because she was able to get a note to me. It said, can I ask about how Oregon's groundwater anti-degradation policy fits in with the use of UICs for stormwater? Also, so two questions, I'll repeat both. What kind of ground truthing has been done, i.e. water quality monitoring, well data, to show that stormwater UICs with 5 feet of separation from groundwater aquifers are protecting the water resource from contamination?
those are some great questions. So let me, if I could actually, I have a couple slides in a different presentation that answers some of those questions. If it's all the same to you, maybe I could just finish off this slide because just have a couple other bullets, and then I'll shift gears and we can talk about anti-degradation and water quality protection. Okay, so just a couple things on this figure. There are gravel lenses in the Troutdale Formation. This is all unsaturated. And what we need to know is how permeable are these lenses. We have some data from nearby where the city of Gresham has a wetland restoration project. They did some slug tests, aquifer tests, and we're able to understand that the range of permeability, which is the K value in Darcy's law, is between 3.4 and 21.7 inches per hour. Once you know that, you can calculate an infiltration rate, right? We know the area of our dry well. We can assume a unit head gradient. So we come up with somewhere in the range of 200 to 400 to 1,500 cubic feet per hour would be, you know, potential infiltration rates. And you can compare that to what's our criteria for success. So the city was looking to infiltrate the water quality storm event, which is 181 cubic feet per hour. And what we thought at the time was that we'd be able to meet that target based on the information we had about permeability and the designs of the dry well. So, okay. So first, let's talk about anti-deg. So the anti-degradation in Oregon is very different from anti-degradation in Washington. And Oregon's groundwater, so anti-degradation in Oregon is found in the groundwater protection rules in Division 40, and it's 340.040. And basically the goal is to protect drinking water quality to, I'm sorry, groundwater quality to drinking water standards. And the kind of wrinkle in Oregon is that whereas I believe in Washington, the point of compliance is at the water table, in Oregon, the point of compliance is at a water well. So now typically in practice, DEQ doesn't set the point of compliance at a water well, but it sets the point of compliance at some place between a water well and a recharge basin or a UIC. So to summarize, in Oregon, you need to meet background groundwater quality, thereby preserving, you know, the quality of water, groundwater to its best beneficial use as drinking water at some compliance point that you could between the injection point and a water well. So that's kind of how that works. Now, as far as data, let me see if everyone could bear with me for just a second. I have a few slides that review some of these. I just need to find that. This might be a good slide. Okay. Let me talk about City of Portland first. I mean, so there are about 4 or 5 situations where groundwater quality is being monitored down gradient of UIC areas to confirm that the anti-degradation rules are being met. And Portland is one of those. So the city operates, the city owns monitoring wells completed in first encounter groundwater throughout its jurisdiction. And these are located downgrading of the UIC area. I believe there are 8 of them. And the city's been monitoring groundwater quality in those for, since I think at least 2008. And they sample for everything under the sun. And basically they don't see the pollutants that we find in stormwater in the groundwater. There was the pollutant in stormwater that is, the most mobile and most common is pentachlorophenol. It's a wood preservative on utility poles, and so that's kind of the marker, so to speak, for stormwater. And they've only seen that there was one sample collected from one of these wells, and it had PCP in it. It also had some petroleum hydrocarbons and other stuff that you didn't see and you don't see in stormwater. So there's something going on at that well, but it was a one-off. I do want to caveat that for some of these wells, there is quite a bit of vertical separation distance. And I think the minimum vertical separation is about 20 feet. So, it's the monitoring well network they have. Another interesting example I will share is over in Hermiston. Hermiston is, let's see, DEQ did a study of groundwater quality in Hermiston. I want to say that was in the early 2010s, maybe the late 2000s. But what they were sampling domestic wells and analyzing for everything under the sun. So what this figure shows is this is a Hermiston's UIC area in this polygon. The yellow points are the wells that DEQ sampled, and the blue arrows are groundwater flow directions. This is the Umatilla River. It's a regional discharge boundary. So groundwater flows to the Umatilla. Umatilla takes off to the north. And in this study, no PCP detections were found. So again, there was no evidence of the stormwater from these UICs impacting groundwater. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that that I can point out. Number one, the concentrations of pollutants in stormwater tend to be very, very low. So they tend to be degraded by bacteria in the subsurface and absorb to soils and also tend to have their concentrations reduced by dispersion. And so I think that's kind of the main reason why we don't see those impacts. But I will say that where we do see impacts, it's from spills. And I think that's a nationwide phenomenon. So I hope I've answered your question. I don't know, did any follow-up questions show up in the chat?
I'm looking, looks like there is a, I don't know if Sang had a question. He was saying it says chat is disabled. So I don't know if he was looking to respond. But you did have a comment that said your synopsis earlier about Washington's program was good. So sounds like you were spot on there. But
I got lucky.
right. I'm not seeing any other questions yet, but I'm happy if somebody wants to jump in with a live question, I'm happy to make you a live speaker. So saying if you had some input, just give me a comment and I'll open it up. But not yet, Matt. So go ahead and proceed.
Okay. We can just revisit once we're done. So so again, with this desktop study, we look at the geology and hydrogeology. We think we can meet our target of 181.5 cubic feet per hour based on the information that's out there. Another thing we look at is, where in the study area should we put this thing? And what we did here is came up with a relative map of infiltration potential, and that relative map of infiltration potential is based on what is that thickness of unsaturated soils. So we looked at the depth of groundwater, we looked at the thickness of the Troutdale Formation in this area, and we came up with this map. So of course, the thicker your unsaturated zone, the more area you have, the more water you're able to push out. So the take-home message was that, basically what's happening here is the depth to groundwater gets deeper as you move to the west. So if we stick a dry well over here in the west, we have the most unsaturated zone, and we're going to be able to have the highest potential of hitting our target. So the drywall ended up going over in this area by SWB5. Okay, so that's the desktop evaluation, and now I can go through the actual construction of the drywell. So we looked at a couple different drywall design options. This design on both of these were bid. So we developed bid specifications for the city, and contractors bid on both of these designs. This design on the left is actually a proprietary design that Old Castle, formerly Torrent Resources, has developed. Catherine Thompson's on the phone, and she can chime in at the end in case I get any of this wrong. But so that's one design, and another design, we call this like the monitoring well design. The big difference between these two kind of gets down to storage volume. So this is a 4-foot diameter lower borehole. They could probably even go bigger than that. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of storage in the pore space where the water can slowly exfiltrate from those pores. Not as much storage volume in this design. The maximum size you could get to with this design, I mean, I say maximum, but for this, while still being somewhat, cost efficient, is about 32 inches. So not as much ability to store your infiltrating stormwater. These, I think, work really, really well where you have low permeability soils. You need to take advantage of that storage so the water can slowly exfiltrate. If you have high permeability soils, then you could look at something like this. You could probably even go smaller, like with a 12-inch diameter. I'll tell you that for the large diameter designs, the Maxwell design that Old Castle has developed was quite a bit more cost effective than this large monitoring well type design. I'm not sure what the numbers would look like if we went, if we were to compare like a smaller monitoring well sort of design, if that were feasible, but it'd be interesting to look at that someday. So anyway, this is design that the city went with because low permeability soils, and they wanted that storage volume. This is where the drywall was installed. We're at the intersection of Multnomah and Wasco in Gresham. The drywall is represented by this middle dot, and then there were, because we're dealing with perched groundwater, we had to set up a couple of dewatering wells next to it during the excavation. The Maxwells are installed with an auger rig. Well, I'll show you in a second. Yeah, so this is the actual installation. So this is an auger rig. I think this is about 3 feet tall, and these might be the 6-foot diameter augers. So what they do is they go down into the hole, auger down, and then they'll come out. You can log your soils over here, and then they'll spin them off and transfer them to a container where they can be hauled off. This isn't going to work when you run into wet soils, so that's why we had to deal with the dewatering. These are some of the soils that we saw. This is right here. This is very typical Troutdale formation. You can probably tell from the photo that we have gravels here, but there's a very high content of fine material, highly weathered. You can see the iron oxidation. This isn't taking that much water. When you get a little bit deeper, though, we're at 60 feet here, a much lower fines content, and this is one of those lenses where you really get your permeability and your ability to infiltrate water. So I want to talk a little bit about the actual sequence of how we drilled this thing. What you're looking at here is a photo of a corrugated metal pipe that was used to create our well seal. It's about 20 feet long. And so step one was to drill our upper 6-foot diameter borehole to about 20 feet below ground. That took us about 29 days. We ran into some equipment issues, so that's why that took a little bit longer than expected. But once we drill that upper borehole, we keyed it into the Troutdale formation. So we had a nice good upper silt layer we could key the seal into. Then we put our pipe in and set the seal. Once that is set, then we go in number 3. and drilled the lower borehole, and those are 4-foot diameter augers, and basically got down to 66 feet. That took us 13 days to do. Then well construction was about 2 days. So well construction is when we're actually putting the gravel backfill and the injection line into the dry well. And finally, we did our testing, which is on the next slide. So here we are on our testing. I mean, we actually we put a transducer in the well so we could record the water level elevation. You know, City of Gresham standard testing protocol is to start the test at 300 gallons per minute. We knew we weren't going to get 300 gallons per minute based on the soils we saw, so we started off at about 200 gallons per minute and then decreased it down to 150, and that's about where we calculated our stable flow level. But you know, our calculated flow for this modified dry well is 1,428 cubic feet per hour, and that exceeds by quite a bit the target. So it was quite a success. I do need to caveat that that is a raw flow rate. It doesn't have any safety factors, and it does not account for decreased performance over time. So, but yeah, I mean, so quite a success. I do, getting near that.
Matt, just a quick, there was a question on it, you know, sequentially where this might fit in, but there was a question that said in Washington, UIC wells have been built before they have been registered. In some cases, it involved a denial of the rule authorization. Is this the problem in other states as well?
So in Oregon, the regulations also require you to receive your rule authorization before constructing the dry well.
Carry on. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, it's a good idea because that way you minimize any issues like construction of a dry well that then doesn't meet rule, and then you're having to figure out how to handle that. So yeah, so I have a quick slide on groundwater quality protection. You know, so at GSI, we work mostly with municipalities. That's our client base. So, you know, we, a lot of times, and especially with the smaller cities, the stormwater folks are sitting right down the hall from the folks who are providing drinking water using groundwater as a source. So I like to approach these sorts of deeper drywell projects with groundwater quality protection in mind. And there are a few things that I recommend, and the city went ahead and did these. You know, number one is to include a shutoff valve in the design. So if there ever is a spill or something like that in the area, you can shut off flow to the dry well. All right. Number two, and I think this is the most important one. I think these things are best used on low traffic streets. When I say low traffic, I mean less than 1,000 trips per day. And I say that because the pollutant loads are much less on low traffic streets. The city of Portland's collected over 3,000 stormwater quality samples from UICs over the past 15 years. And it's remarkable the difference in pollutant concentrations between less than 1,000 trips per day and greater than 1,000 trips per day streets. At residential streets, lower potential for spills. And you know, anyway, you know, I suppose that oil dumping is still going to be more of an issue on residential streets, but that oil doesn't tend to move too much on the subsurface. So in the context of groundwater quality protection, I'm more worried about, you know, the tanker trucks and gasoline solvents, those sorts of things that you're largely avoiding when you're over on the low traffic residential streets.
Two quick things, Matt.
Yeah.
There's two questions. One says, hi, this is Ann from Old Castle. Just a heads up that Catherine Thomason had to leave the meeting, but I'm happy to answer any Maxwell Drywell questions that come up. And then some more of, I think, a comment or adding piece. The other one was, what does he mean by a shutoff valve on the line from the CB or what?
Okay, that's a good question. So what the city did is they had an existing storm line that comes through in green like this, and they installed some piping to intercept that flow and convey it over to the dry well. So the shutoff valve for the city is right here. So if there's an issue, then the stormwater will be diverted, past the dry well. It will not go into the dry well. But to your point, questions about could you put it on the catch basin inlet, and that would seem just as good a place as any to put it. I guess you'd want it to be some easily accessible place. You could train people how to get to it and all that good stuff. So does that answer your question?
We'll see if they respond, if there's other feedback. It said, thank you. Still scratching my head a little bit though, but good.
Okay, we'll take it.
There's another one here.
Yeah.
That is, how large of a drainage area does the one UIC serve? What is the estimated lifetime of the UIC cleaning frequency?
I do not know what the catchment area is for this dry well. So cleaning frequency, I also don't know that, but that's one of our recommendations. So again, this is the dry well that was constructed, and we have a drop pipe in here that monitors the water level in the dry well. And what the city is going to do is install a dedicated pressure transducer that basically monitors the water level. So by monitoring that water level during subsequent storm events, they'll be able to track dry well performance over time, and that will inform cleaning rehabilitation frequency. So that's the idea. I can tell you from the water well world, and I'm again not sure if this is applicable to the dry well world, but the rule of thumb in the water well world is when you see a 25% performance decline, then you start, thinking about rehab.
Here's another question while you're continuing. Another one from Amy coming via email. Question about the seal for the modified UIC. Is it the galvanized pipe that is the seal, or do you have a seal within that pipe? What happens when the galvanized pipe degrades over time?
Yes, let me show you a little bit better picture here. Okay, so what we do is, so the galvanized pipe is this symbol here, if I'm highlighting that correctly. And I have to apologize that I'm still finalizing this figure, so I've got a couple symbols to correct. But basically what you have is you have bentonite grout on the outside of that galvanized and on the inside. So basically the seal is the cement, and the galvanized, and it completely surrounds the galvanized, and that's basically a coating to protect from corrosion. Okay, groundwater quality protection. What else? Oh, I find this kind of goes without saying, but to maintain your protective vertical and horizontal separation distances, that 5 feet of vertical separation in Oregon has been demonstrated by modeling studies. That's where that comes from, that show that basically you have those 5 feet, then pollutant concentrations will decline to zero by the time they hit groundwater. Again, it's a function of the low concentrations of pollutants in stormwater. So
Here was a follow-up too, just to, is on
Yeah.
that galvanized pipe issue. Is zinc from the galvanized steel an issue with stormwater infiltration?
I don't, let me bring this up, and I don't think so, because what we have is, okay, so we have the galvanized is right here. Again, I'll just highlight that. And surrounded by the bentonite. And then this is a concrete chamber right here. Okay, so the stormwater comes in through here. It's in the concrete chamber, and then it enters, overflows into the injection line here. So we've got concrete, PVC, PVC, PVC. So there's really no like contact with any zinc from the galvanized during infiltration. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's some pretty good chat going on. I don't know if you're able to see that now, Matt, but I've sort of tried to adjust some settings.
Okay.
Tori had mentioned none of the zinc on this pipe should be exposed to water.
Yeah.
And then Rick Hansen had suggested, please go to the last slide again with the recommended parameters on it, like less than 1,000 ADT, et cetera.
For the groundwater quality protection?
I'm going to say yes, but I can't confirm that. And then, yeah, Rick said, yeah, that's fine. So I think you're good there. And then another question from Craig P. Can you legally infiltrate into several aquifers separated by, is it aquitard, as long as infiltrating above seasonal high water table?
Well, so that gets into some, I think, uncertainty with the regulations. So can you legally, if I could recast this question, I would recast it as, can you infiltrate into a perched groundwater? And the answer would be maybe. I think in this situation in Northeast Gresham, you could, because nobody, it's a very localized perched groundwater. Nobody's using it for drinking water purposes. I mean, that's kind of what this gets down to. Is that perched groundwater a source, an underground source of drinking water? And, you know, for that particular situation, I think the answer would be no. Now I'm thinking over in Bend, they have some perched groundwater. There are also water wells that are domestic water wells, using that as an underground source of drinking water. I think the answer would be no for that scenario. So again, it really gets into, is this an underground source of drinking water? So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yeah, we do have another one coming in. I'm just going to keep firing them at you, Matt, as they come in.
All right.
So, Sang had a question here. Is there a standard factor of safety that is required across the state for all UIC regarding infiltration rate, or is that determined by each city?
That's determined by the cities. So DEQ's purview is groundwater quality protection. You know, basically, when you're getting into making sure flooding isn't happening, for example, that falls with the city. And that's where the safety factor comes in.
Okay, go ahead, carry on. I don't see anything else
All right.
yet.
Well, yeah, I'm on my last slide. So conclusions and recommendations. You know, I think first of all, the performance we measured exceeded our target by quite a bit. So that was great news. Again, this is not your long-term sustainable performance or injection volume. This is, you know, this is a raw rate, no safety factor. It doesn't account for declines in performance over time. But I like where we are right now, and we'll have to see how that changes over time. That's kind of the next big question. Second recommendation that I talked about briefly was to instrument this with a pressure transducer to track water level rise over time and to monitor. Basically, what you're doing is monitoring performance over time. And another thing I thought would be a recommendation is to, if you are doing stormwater quality monitoring as a part of a permit, to include this modified dry well in that program, because the city is, so this is preliminarily a success. We'll see if it holds up over the coming years, but those stormwater management challenges in this area are still there. And I think it would be helpful to have some additional confidence in the stormwater quality in the area when you start thinking about, expansion of a drywell, modified drywell program in this area. Okay, a couple more. Oh boy, the cost question. That's a really good question, and I wish I had an answer for you. Let me answer the construction and testing timeline. Where'd that go? Here's our construction timeline. And Rich, if it's okay with you, what I might propose is I could maybe get back to you about the cost. I would need to talk to the city and just confirm. All right. Well, so that's all I had. Thanks for joining me and talking about dry wells for a while today.
It looks like, Matt, there might be another.
Yeah, great.
It says Anne mentioned she can answer costs generically. Do you want me to go ahead and make Anne live, and then while I'm pulling that up, what are the main contaminants that PDX has found in their UIC WQ monitoring program?
Sure. How about I take contaminants first, and then Anne, we can kick it over to you. Or maybe I'll need to go find that. Oh, here we go. So when we're looking at infiltration, we're thinking about maximum contaminant levels, or MCLs. Those are the limits that you have to meet in the Safe Drinking Water Act. And what you're looking at on this table is these are the pollutants that have exceeded the MCL in the city of Portland's stormwater sampling data set. This is a few years out of date, but as you can see, I mean, about 1,500 samples. This is a pretty robust data set. And we have these these four bad actors that tend to exceed MCLs with in basically more than 1% of samples. And that's pentachlorophenol from the utility poles I mentioned earlier, lead, which is ubiquitous in the environment. DEHP is also ubiquitous. That's a phthalate. And benzoate-pyrene, which is from incomplete combustion of hydrocarbons, vehicle traffic, basically. So these are the four that we see showing up quite a bit in the municipal stormwater. And the pentachlorophenol is by far the most mobile of these. So that tends to be the risk driver.
Okay, I've made Anne able to talk, and then there are a couple more questions. So Anne, if you can hear this, looks like you are able to talk.
Great, thanks, Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I just wanted to give input generically on the cost of our Oldcastle Maxwell deep dry wells. Certainly, as Matt mentioned, they can vary in depth from 50 to 100 feet. So typically for a 50-foot deep unit, it's about $50,000. And I guess also just tying to somebody asked about drainage area, since it is so dependent on depth and the site's infiltration rate, that really is what's going to control how many deep dry wells you would need per site. But what Catherine can work with you on is figure out like local hydrology data and groundwater data to then give an estimate on sizing, for a site and how many dry wells you would need for that, to meet that site on like maybe a commercial site or roadway application. So hopefully that helps and gives just some more generic answers, not necessarily relevant to this project, but what you can expect to see for in the Portland area.
Thanks, Ann. And I would add to that this one was cost more than that because we had that seal.
Right. Yes, that's true.
That threw an extra 25
Yeah.
into it.
Yeah, the seal did that. That's right.
So an
And-
additional question, I don't think we get to this one here, is be sure to clarify the point of compliance for these. This is the end of pipe, not at groundwater. Is that correct way I'm reading that, Matt?
Yeah, so Tori, thanks for adding that. And I guess it's self-evident what Tori's saying, but maybe just to drive the point home a little bit. Where these samples are being collected, these stormwater samples are being collected at the point where the stormwater discharges into the dry well. So these concentrations that you're looking at are coming from that location. They're not coming from like groundwater samples, for example, or below the UIC.
And another question here from Sang, maybe you can see that one. What's keeping the deeper section of the dry well from collapsing? Was that an area backfilled with drainage rock? I saw arrows pointing to this section, but the label was cut off on the slide.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think there are two answers to that. First of all, there's collapse during drilling. Second of all, there's collapse over the long term. So during drilling, these are drilled open hole. At least that's how Oldcastle did their design. So you're really counting on the soils to stand up. And that was actually a pretty important consideration when we were looking at doing this in the Troutdale Formation. Those are cemented gravels, so we were pretty confident that those would stay open. Now during operation, saying yes, it's the cavity is backfilled with gravel, and that's what keeps it open. And I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, it's the gravel backfill that's really is what's, so it's not really collapsing because the hole is completely full with compacted gravel that surrounds the casing for the injection.
Okay. Tori, is there anything else you wanted to add? Tori's over at the City of Gresham, and when I say that, we've been working together on this for several years, that's the individual I'm referring to.
Tori, I've allowed you to talk, Tori. So if you
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
Put everybody on the spot today.
No, excellent work, Matt. The only thing I was going to say is I was just kind of trying to look up the drainage area question that came up, and because I know we had looked at some various areas, but yeah, we're talking the area that, as most people are thinking about this, because this is still within our piped MS4 system and we have a diversion structure. The goal with this was to maximize what we could infiltrate. So probably the catchment area is way larger. I mean, it's acres of drainage area going to this. So it's way over what we expect the capacity of this dry well to be. And I was just trying to think, I don't have the exact calculations. I was trying to come up with those in a really handy way, but I believe it is, I think it is, it's multiple acres, and typical dry wells, it's, we are looking at more like maybe an acre max that you would drain into one of these, or half acre. So it's a lot bigger. But I don't think there's anything else I really wanted to add other than it was a really fun project. I'll be really interested to see how this works. As Matt kind of alluded to, I had missed the beginning because I had another meeting, but part of the reason why we had to go with that sealed upper part on this is because we do have some dry wells in this area. We know that what ends up happening is that we get some mounding of the water in large events that kind of hit the kind of the two different layers. So we wanted to kind of see what we could get if we went down below that layer, sealed off that upper part so that none of the water that was sitting in that could drop down the dry well hole and kind of take some of the capacity we needed for infiltrating some of this residential stormwater.
Thanks, Tori. Okay. I think that's everything. That's all I had.
Great. Thank you, Matt. I mean, it was a very robust conversation. I appreciate everybody jumping in. I think that's the goal of these technical sessions. Maybe we should have made everybody live on camera, had a little bit more face-to-face interaction. But Matt, are we able to just go ahead and share this presentation as a PowerPoint, or excuse me, as a PDF? I know there's a couple questions that were asked about having access to this.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
I can. Yeah, I'll just shoot it over to you with that.
Yeah, shoot me a PDF, Matt, and I will send that out this afternoon to all the attendees. See if there was any other questions. Yeah, just a couple of thank yous. So really appreciate that. So with that, I really appreciate everybody attending. A great turnout, a great conversation. And Matt, do you want to give everybody your email address if they want to reach out to you? What's the best way?
Oh boy, you're gonna make me spell my name.
It'll be in the PowerPoint, right? It'll be in the slide.
Oh, that'd be a smart thing to do, wouldn't it? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
You put it in the slide deck, and I'll make sure it's there. And I can also put it in the email so people can reach out to you directly with any questions.
Yeah, I would just say feel free to give me a call. I love talking about UICs, so I'm happy to chat anytime.
Great.
Yeah, hey, thanks for everyone attending, and thanks for the city. Thanks to Tori and the city for being willing to share the project as well.
Good. Okay. With that, everybody, remember, Business in the Environment is coming up in December 6th through 7th. We have a early bird rate going on right now through the end of the week. So if it's a conference you'd like to attend, sign up soon. We like to get people signing up early. People are so accustomed to signing up at the last minute, but sign up soon. It's going to be a great event. And with that, everyone, have a great day. And again, thank you, Matt and GSI.